the Holy Grail, the head of Christ, the Elixir of Life, vast treasure and powerful political conspiracies. All of these and more are part of the tale of that enigmatic warrior brotherhood we know as the Knights Templar. It is said they discovered a great secret buried deep beneath the Temple of Solomon and gathered together in order to protect it from generation to generation. Over time, they were feared by all their enemies, not least of which was eventually the Catholic Church itself. A powerful and mighty brotherhood with real hidden secrets that spanned across the known world and even beyond into the world of the Americas. And all of this from the humble origins of a handful of supposedly poor warrior monks. The truth is, the Templars had found great treasure. It gave them immense wealth, property, and power. Their strength was so great that monarchs of Europe feared them, and some plotted their demise. But their treasure was more than material wealth. It was also philosophically, mystically, and spiritually profound. So profound that it was in fact the ultimate secret that has been hidden and protected by secret societies ever since. Prepare to discover the truth. So what was the real story of this enigmatic group? It's time to delve deep and often to places we cannot imagine. We will discover that they did hold a very profound and powerful secret that made them so dangerous they were supposedly disbanded. Welcome to the world of the Knights Templar. They were originally called the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, which thankfully has been much shortened to the Knights Templar, or, for the really lazy, just Templars. They were a Christian military order, recognized by Papal Bull in 1139. In fact, they were originally founded in 1119 in Jerusalem, and it would be 10 years after they had finally grown in sufficient size to become active in the defense of the faith. They eventually became one of the wealthiest and most powerful Christian orders. They grew rapidly through charitable donations, and rich kids flocked to join. Their clever ways of finance of Christendom aided in both their wealth and power, but also brought a lot of jealousy and resentment. The Fighting Knights were distinctive and known by all who saw them, from Europe to various holy crusades. The non-warriors, meanwhile, managed vast sums of money and huge tracts of land. They were responsible for creating what we now call banks. They built huge fortifications and castles across Europe and the Holy Land. But their reason for existing was also hugely linked to the Crusades to take and defend the Holy Land. When eventually the Holy Land was lost to Islam, their reason for existing began to disappear. Soon royalty were eyeing the Templar wealth and property, and their end was in sight. There spread rumors around a secret and perverted the initiation ceremony, and King Philip IV of France decided to take advantage. Philip was deeply in debt and needed money fast. By 1307, he had many Templars residing in France arrested and tortured into giving false testimony against their own. Many were burned at the stake. Others fled or joined other orders. By 1312, Pope Clement V officially disbanded the order under pressure from the French king. The suddenness, the secrecy, the once great and powerful order, the tragic demise, all this and more gives rise to legends, and eventually their name became a Masonic degree. Modern Templars arose, games, movies, and more. The name Templar is now known again across the world. But let us now go back in time to the origins of this once simple brotherhood of so-called poverty and trace their rise to power. By 1099, Christendom had managed to take Jerusalem from the Muslims following the First Crusade. Now the way this was open for Christians to make pilgrimages from Europe to the Holy Land, but danger was everywhere. Jerusalem may have been safe for Christians, but the route to it was not. Marauding bandits were everywhere, and they preyed upon Christians due to the fact they were often carrying large sums of money as offerings for their basic survival. Thousands lost their lives, and something needed to be done. The man in charge of Jerusalem was King Baldwin II. And by 1119, a French knight by the name of Hugh de Payenne petitioned the king to create an order of warrior monks to protect the pilgrims along their journey. Both the king and the Patriarch of Jerusalem agreed to the request, and the newly formed Templars were granted a wing at the royal palace on Temple Mount. The Temple Mount lay directly above the location it was believed that the Temple of Solomon had originally been. This is why they were to become known as the Poor Knights of Christ and the Temple of Solomon. They were originally only 9 in number and relied upon financial donations to survive. Indeed, their symbol of 2 knights upon 1 horse indicates their poverty. But such poverty was soon ended. They found themselves a powerful ally in Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, who himself founded the White Monks of the Cistercian order. Through Bernard, the status of the Templars rose and rose until they were soon officially recognized by the Church. Now they had official status, the money started to roll in from across the Christian world. Donations of land and property followed swiftly, and so did volunteers from wealthy families who each brought more wealth. In 1139, the Pope himself decreed that the order was exempt from all local laws. This simply meant that they could wander freely through Christendom without paying taxes, and nobody dared to argue, for they carried the seal of the Pope himself. Their power and strength grew, and soon they were the go-to people for any battle. During the Crusades, their might was used to shock the enemy into submission. Their highly trained battle techniques, heavily armed horses, and legend would strike at the heart of the enemy. In turn, the very sight of them charging would give added impetus to the Christian soldiers behind them. Such was the power and skill that in 1177, at the Battle of Montcassard, 500 Templars and a few thousand infantry defeated Saladin's massed army of 26,000 soldiers. As Bernard of Clairvaux would say, a Templar knight is truly a fearless knight and secure on every side. For his soul is protected by the armor of faith, just as his body is protected by the armor of steel. He is thus doubly armed, and need fear neither demons nor men. However, most Templars were in fact not warriors. Behind every knight there was an army of support assistants. From the menial to the monetary, there were thousands who administered the huge operation. Each member was sworn to poverty, and yet many were in control of such huge sums of money that whole nations were envious. Because they controlled such wealth, they developed a thing called a letter of credit, a simple note that promised the Templars would reimburse the holder of such a note. This was the origin of the dollar bill or pound note. A person could deposit wealth with a Templar in France, take a note of promise, traverse the Holy Land, and give the note to the Templars in Jerusalem and receive his money. For this they donated to the Templar cause. This was banking and may very well have been the very first in existence. But it did work, and now the marauding thieves could no longer steal from the people who had nothing. From Europe to the Middle East, the Templars grew in power and wealth. Massive landholdings were donated or bought, and soon they were running farms, vineyards, and businesses. They built fortifications, churches, and cathedrals. They manufactured, imported, and exported, and built their own fleet of ships. Their power was unprecedented. In fact, they had become not just the first international army and bank, but also the first multinational and faceted business. By the middle of the 12th century, the Templars found themselves competing against two other orders, the Knights Hospitallers and the Teutonic Knights. Their political bickering and military scraps, in fact, were weakening Christendom, and with the rise of effective Islamic leaders such as Saladin, things started to get more difficult. As Christian brothers fought each other, Islam moved in and started to take back the Holy Land piece by piece. Soon the perceptions about Templar power were weakened. Also, they backed this up with several unsuccessful campaigns against Saladin. By 1244, Jerusalem itself had fallen and would not come under Christian control again until 1917. It was the start of a slippery slope until Friday the 13th, 1307, when eventually the Templars were arrested for heresy and, following confessions, burned at the stake. The remaining Templars were disbanded or joined other orders. The Pope decreed that Templar property should be absorbed into the holdings of the Knights Hospitaller. Many, in fact, see the disbanding of the Templars as simply a merging of two orders. Many Templar organizations simply changed their names from Knights Templar to Order of Christ. Today, the Catholic Church states that the medieval persecution of the Templars was in fact unjust, and they had in fact done nothing wrong, and that Pope Clement had been pressured into his actions by the dominance of King Philip of France and the public outcry. But is that the end of the story? We all know that it is not, for the film The Da Vinci Code brought the whole thing back to life. But it was before the film that the secrets had started to emerge. In fact, Dan Brown's tale is simply a fictional expression of several books from decades before that all began to unravel the secrets of the Templars and their link to things much more profound than mere money. It all started a long time before anybody had the ideas about the Knights Templar. It all begins with the myth of the Savior. Today, there is one popular savior myth that has crept into popular folklore through various best-selling books, documentaries, and films: the Merovingian dynasty. The Merovingian dynasty has been romantically depicted by both the regional writers in France and international best-selling authors such as Dan Brown and Besant, Lee, and Lincoln. There are tales of mystery and magic, of wisdom and light, and last but not least, descent from God Himself via His Son Jesus and His supposed wife Mary Magdalene. Some even go so far as to say that the Merovingians were descended from an ultra-ancient race of fallen angels that spawned the globe, taking wisdom and knowledge with them as Atlantis sank. It all started with the leader of the Salian Franks known as Merovech in the 5th century AD. Both he and his son Childeric I were great warriors and fought bravely against the Visigoths, Saxons, and Alemanni. Following Childeric came his son Clovis I, who went on to unite most of Gaul and the Lauri and defeated the Roman ruler, Syagrius, to the joy of almost everybody. Or so the propaganda goes. It was Clovis I who adopted the Roman Catholic religion for his nation. Eventually, by the early 7th century, we end up with the infamous Dagobert II, also known as Dragobert, coming from the words dragon and Bert, which in turn comes from Bara and Para, which means Pharaoh. So Dagobert simply means king or Pharaoh of the dragons. Such links to dragons or winged serpents will become extremely important in our tale. Dagobert is said to have visited Ireland, a home of serpent worship, and is also said to have married at Rennes-le-Château, where incidentally a ritual skull was found which had a hole in its forehead. Still today, Masons worship the head or skull of Dagobert, calling it Mahomet, much like the head the Templars were accused of worshipping, called Baphomet. It is kept in the covenant of the Black Sisters at Mans. The cup that was formed to hold the skull is made into the shape of a chalice. Hence, we have the head of the dragon Pharaoh in the chalice, and we wonder how Dagobert became linked to the Holy Grail. But who is Dagobert and where did he come from? What makes him so important that his skull should be turned into a grail and even eventually worshipped by the Masons, the modern Templars? The year 469 AD and the Roman Catholic Church makes a pact with Clovis I, king of the Franks, giving him the title New Constantine as a thank you for becoming Christian. This was the beginning of the Holy Roman Empire, which was hoped to last forever, but it did not. By the year 800 AD, the empire was threatened. Dagobert II was the French king from the supposed Grail, Merovingian bloodline, and was the last of the Merovingian kings to hold the title the Holy Roman Emperor. These Merovingians were said to be a dynasty of Frankish priest kings with magical powers derived from their long red hair and the special birthmark between their shoulders of a red cross. This symbol would eventually be used by the Templars on their white cloaks. Obviously, the Christians spread rumors of witchcraft and various other misdemeanors because Dagobert was seen as a threat. After several years spent away from his Frankish kingdom, Dagobert returned from Ireland in 679, but there were problems with the mayors of the palace. 3 years later, the Catholic Church plotted a conspiracy against him due to their displeasure with Dagobert's lack of allegiance to the Roman Church. While on a hunting trip, Dagobert was lanced through the eye by his own godson as part of the ploy. Now, power was passed to Charles Martel, beginning the famous Carolingian dynasty. This basically ended the Merovingian bloodline and its run of power. From that day, the Merovingian kings were powerless and were officially thought to have died out with Dagobert's grandson, Childeric III. Charles Martel's grandson Charlemagne was anointed Holy Roman Emperor. The Catholics had wiped out the troublesome Merovingians once and for all. Or did they? Some still claim today that they are descendants of this special bloodline. However, my researchers have only gone to prove that this is pure propaganda. Thousands of books have sprouted in the last few decades, with new evidence, none of which is verifiable and based upon legends only. The Merovingians, born of the sea, with kings connected etymologically with the snake, as well as ritualistically, were simply descendants of a serpent bloodline. The royal line descended from serpent priests seen across the globe in India and China, in Britain and America, and basically everywhere else. Their connections with the Grail are simply via the secret of the snake, and their obvious pagan past brought down the Christian might of Rome. But we shall move into these secrets as we move along. One of the most striking images in Christian history is the Red Cross. Whether a strict Latin or a Templar croix paté, it is the memorable symbol, especially seen on a stark white background. Seen in relation to the Mark of Cain, or the Merovingian birthmark, or even the Templar cross, they all seemingly relate in one way or another to be a symbol of the snake. Indeed, the Red Cross is an almost universal symbol of the snake, and therefore, to wear it, one is branding oneself as a serpent worshipper. The reason for this is quite simple. The serpent and the snake were intertwined. The snake was a symbol of the sun, and the cross a symbol of the seasons. Jesus himself was known to have been involved in this whole serpent worship world. He was equated with a serpent in the wilderness held up by Moses, and he sloughed off his skin in the tomb and was resurrected just as snakes were seen to do. The Rosicrucians, obviously meaning the Rose or Red Cross, were a strange esoteric secret society of alchemists and spiritualists. Linked inextricably to the Masons, Templars, and others in the story of the Grail, they have been greatly debated and researched. It is interesting and also ironic to note that the connection between the healing element of the Grail and the real, deeper significance of the Grail has been completely overlooked, even though it remains a hands-on, objective truth. When the Templars were supposedly terminated in 1307, and the Grand Master of the Order, Jacques de Molay, was burned at the stake in 1314 AD, it is said that Molay cried from the stake that his persecutors, Pope Clement and King Philippe of France, would join him within the year. True to his word, Pope Clement was dead within the month, said to have been from a bout of dysentery, and King Philippe by the end of the year from causes which remain unknown. This is a startling example of the power of the Templars. They remained not in name, but certainly in number. It also gives us a glimmer into the real secret of the Holy Grail, for it was well known that the Templars were proficient exponents of the secret art of poisoning. In the mysteries of Ceres and Proserpine, the great secret is communicated to the initiates. The bull has begotten a serpent, and the serpent a bull. The bull is a symbol of the generative force, the power. It is a symbol of the sun in Taurus and emerges from the sea. As the Quinotaur, the bull supposedly spawned the Merovingian bloodline, with his son called Merovic, after the sacred bull of Heliopolis, Meroe. It was the king Merovic, the first in line of the Merovingian kings, who was said to have been spawned by the Quinotaur. This is a giant sea monster with a bull or goat's head. So the Mer part of Merovi becomes obvious in that Mer means sea, born of the sea. The Quinotaur, if broken down, resolves into Tar for bull and Quin for king. He is the king bull of the sea, the sun in Taurus. This king bull goes back a long way in history, right back to the days of the Mesopotamia and kings such as Sargon and Menes. But this goes back yet further in an association between these kings and their legendary genesis from ancient sea-born gods such as Oannes and Dagon, who were nothing less than serpent gods. The sun as a serpent would sink beneath the horizon and become a fish. Dag means fish, and On means sun. Dagon is therefore the nighttime serpent sun, otherwise known as the Black Sun in various esoteric traditions. The Black Sun is a symbol of the underworld and the unconscious. Could it be that these legendary creatures are archetypes from the unconscious? This is the element Gnostics believe to be the true self. And the early Gnostics were in fact serpent worshippers who had a holy snake Eucharist. They were also the people responsible for writing down the whole Jesus myth and giving us the New Testament we know today. And the Templars hinted at these secrets in their symbolism. In fact, the Christians of later time went on to use the image of the Ouroboros as a symbol of the Alpha and Omega elements of their Christian faith. The Levites, of course, derived their name from the Leviathan. Their name means sons of the Leviathan. Oannes is also the same as the Hindu Vishnu, who is linked with the serpent. However, there is another interpretation of equal worth for the Quinotaur, as we shall see. Heracles wrestled with the snake, which transformed itself into a bull. Heracles tore off one of the horns, which the nymphs tossed into the river, where it turned into the cornucopia or horn of plenty. In Scotland, there are hundreds of Pictish symbols found on rocks and ancient Neolithic monuments. There are many that are in the image of the snake, and also with the snake in association with the bull, thus revealing the widespread nature of the bull-serpent association. The Quinatar has the root king, being possibly from Cain, and therefore showing Quinatar to be descendant from the serpent race of Cain. Kin is also related to serpent and king. But what is the Quinatar? Quin, as we can see, could be from king. Tar is obviously from Taurus the bull. It could also come from the Babylonian Quin, who was the greatest among the children of the dragon goddess Tiamat. According to Babylonian legend, in the beginning there was neither land, gods, nor men. There were only elements known as Tiamat and Apsu. Tiamat was the female and the spirit of salt water and primal chaos, and Apsu the male, the spirit of fresh water and void. Tiamat is depicted with scales and a serpent body with legs, with horns on her head. The union of these two gods produced all the other gods, including the greatest among them, Quin. The Quinatar was a mythical sea beast, said to be half bull and half fish, or dragon serpent. This could very easily be the indication of Taurus going into Pisces and a message of the stars. However, according to author Crichton Miller, the sign Aries has been deliberately removed or left out of the name in order to claim that their bloodline stretched back to the end of the age of Taurus. The Quinatar is also said to have sired the Merovingian bloodline, as we have seen. The same Merovingians, said by several authors to be descendants of Jesus, the sun deity, and so he is the sun or ruler in each sign. Quinatar, traced backwards through Greek into the Phoenician legend, is none other than Zeus, the very same god who impregnated his own daughter with Dionysius. But how is Zeus related to the Quinatar? Well, Quinatar is dragon, the half-fish serpent linked to Oannes and Oedicon, and giving us the dragon title. Elsewhere, Dagon is known as Daenos, and Zeus as Dios. As we know, Zeus was known to have taken the form of the serpent to procreate, just as Quinatar sires a race of sacred kings. And in the Orphic legends, it was the son of Zeus, Dionysius, who was to be the fifth ruler of the world. The Phoenician legend involves him in the disappearance of the daughter of Canaan, Europa. Europa was a princess, or the daughter of a god, and was said to be very beautiful. One day, a servant told Europa that a white bull had appeared on a local beach. This tame bull allowed Europa to wrap garlands of flowers around its horn and to climb on for a ride. But the bull ran off with Europa into the sea. She was never seen again. Now we have an entire continent named after a missing girl, stolen by a bull. All of this is beginning to sound very strange, and on the face of it, none of this ought to relate. But please stay with it a while, as all will become clear. We must now move into an area that at first glance will also appear unrelated, the Wandering Jew. A myth mainly from the Middle Ages of a Jew said to have lived at the time of Christ and to live forever. Apparently, according to the Christian additions to the myth, he offended Christ on his way to the cross and was therefore cursed to walk the earth alone until the end of time. One of the most interesting things, however, is not the later Middle Age myths, which were attached to the character, but the origin. The Wandering Jew is literally an amalgamation of hundreds of supposedly separate characters, all immortal. However, it is my view that they all originate from the source of serpent immortality. The modern myth probably comes from a character called Malchus, who strikes Jesus in John 18:20 and gets the curse of immortality. However, in Matthew 16:28, there is also the disciple who Jesus infers immortality upon. There be some standing here which shall not taste of death. Note that Jesus, however, says some. There were indeed several characters that Jesus bestowed earthly immortality upon, and not as a curse, but as a gift. There is also one named Samari, who in the Quran is cursed with immortality by Moses, the wielder of the serpent Caduceus. And not forgetting that Jesus is likened to Moses, who lifted the brazen serpent in the wilderness. There is a remarkable astrotheological reason for this. Jesus was adept. He could fix time because he understood the motion of the planets and the sun, being a sun deity himself. Fixing the motion is symbolic immortality, for it escapes the cycles of life, nirvana. It is in essence piercing or lancing the dragon, which is the sun passing overhead. The wandering Jew, therefore, must be somebody who understands the power and has fixed time, albeit symbolically. But there is also more to this character. There are always more levels of understanding, more levels of heaven. The Grotto della Sibella, which is said to be in the Umbrian Mountains and was mentioned in the medieval period romance, Mako is mentioned as having been turned into a serpent by the enchantress called Sibylla, who is connected to the healing serpent. This Mako is the wandering Jew in serpentine form, the same wandering Jew who sheds his skin. Malchus is also known as Ahasverus or Butideus, and in the myth it was a porter that Ahasverus struck Christ and mocked him for walking slowly. Jesus told him to wait for his return, which of course never happened, and so Ahasverus lived still. Later Christian editions indicate that he repented of his sins and became a Catholic, which is obvious propaganda. However, and what is most extraordinary, he is said to grow old in the normal way. But when he reaches the age of 100, he sheds his skin and rejuvenates to the age of 30, which can be more like the tail of the rejuvenating snake, and to the sacred age of 30, which is the age of illumination and the same age as the degrees between each and every zodiacal sign. The wandering Jew is also likened to Cain, the father of the serpent race, whom is said wanders the earth as an immortal, as the Lord put a mark upon him so that none would hurt him, the same mark that the Merovingians carried and would later adorn the robes of the Knights Templar, a blood-red cross. Now, some of this information may seem to have very little to do with the Templars, but the truth is simple. The Templars are linked to all of these esoteric concepts and more. They are the alchemists, secret orders, Gnostics, and indeed, they are the wandering Jew personified. The origin of modern occult secret societies is with the Knights of the Temple. Look deeply into most ancient cult secrets and you will be looking into the world of beliefs the Templars came up against, learned, and absorbed into their fold. The end result, of course, being one of the most powerful secret societies on the planet, the Freemasons. Indeed, one of their hand gestures is the symbol of the horned god himself. The wandering Jew and the horned god are intertwined in their legends. There is also an amazing legend about the linking of Herne, or Cernunnos, the horned god, with the wandering Jew. in that they are one and the same. It is said that Herne told Jesus to drink water from the indent of a horse's hoof, telling Jesus, therefore, to subjugate himself to the old ways. From Pashupate to Pan, the horned god is seen throughout history in connection with the secret of the serpent. It is Pan who kicks open the cister of the Bacchus, revealing the serpent from within. Dionysius, or Bacchus, is often depicted with horns, and the Bacchanals of Thrace were said to wear the horns in imitation of their god. Even Zeus, who transformed himself into a serpent to bring Dionysius to life, was often depicted as having horns. The horns are thought to signify the solar aspect of the god, the life-giving aspect. They are also symbolic of the bull, which is again a solar symbol of the son of Taurus. The goat is also associated in terms of animals and horns with the serpent, as Dionysius is often manifested as a goat. Indeed, the awakening of Moses is symbolized by horns or shining forth. This, the same Moses who wields the caduceus staff and raises the brazen spirit of healing for Yahweh in the wilderness, a point not lost on 1st century AD medallions which show Jehovah as a serpent. The horns that emerge as the enlightenment aspect of the serpent, the shining or illumination one gains from the processes known as Kundalini or other similar methods. They are symbolic representation of what occurs inside the head. Heads are central to the story of the serpent cults, and there are many instances which prove this point. Hydra was the Greek water dragon, said by Alcaius to have 9 heads, one of which was immortal. And of course, snakes are poisonous. Strabo gives a telling of the tale of the usefulness of the poison of the snake, as he points out that the Anagros River of Elis emits an offensive odor for a distance of 20 stadia and makes the fish unfit to eat. This is attributed by some writers to the fact that certain of the Kinturoi here washed off the poison they got from the Hydra. The bathing water from here cures leprosy, elephantitis, and scabies. A strange aspect for poison to have, that it should, diluted in the waters of the river, have medicinal benefit. It has to be related to the equally peculiar concept that the Hydra has one immortal head. This, of course, relates to the discovery by author Philip Gardiner that our ancestors used venom and blood of the snake as a unique medicinal substance or elixir. Could this be a clue to the dilution ratio of venom to blood, an 8-to-1 ratio? According to the Argonautica, the arrows dipped in the blood of the Hydra were used to kill the dragon of Hesperides, which lay by the trunk of the apple tree. There is another hint that maybe the diluted poison should be mixed with the horse. Heracles shot his poisonous arrows into Nessus. As he died, Nessus, knowing how poisonous the arrows were, since they had been dipped in the gall of the Lernaean Hydra, drew out some of his blood and gave it to Deianira, telling her it was a love charm. If she wanted her husband not to desert her, she should have his garments smeared with this blood. This is not obviously linked with a horse at all, until we discover that Nessus was a centaur, and therefore half horse, half man, like Chiron, the teacher of the snake god Aesculapius. Let's just sideline a moment and look at the horse. The etymology of the horse is strangely linked with the snake, and it is an amazing trip through the mythologies of the world to discover the secret of this association. The word nag is now synonymous with the horse, but it comes from the Middle English nage, which itself is a derivation of the word snag, snagga or snecka, which is snake. This relates strongly back to India, where the word used for snake was naga. Here, alone in language, we have this particular mixing between the snake and the horse, which has occurred over a vast period of time and is yet still observable today. The horse, without doubt, is not only linked with the serpent, but also the sun, as we would expect. In Gaulish, coins there are representations of the serpent under or over a horse, said to be a symbol of the sun god. In fact, in the Bible we have Jesus, the sun god, riding or on top of the ass or horse as he rides triumphantly into Jerusalem to death and then a new life. The pattern of the sun each day. However, there is a remarkable scientific reason for this association. In order to produce antivenom, non-lethal doses are injected into horses over a period of time. The horse naturally builds up antibodies specifically designed to neutralize the venom. Eventually, the horse's blood is collected and the antibodies extracted to produce antivenom. This amazing coincidence is not new. It has been known about for centuries and is as old as oral tradition can be. This idea of the ancient concept of the horse is also seen in particular images of horseshoes seen on rock art in Australia, from before there were even horses in Australia. Getting back now to the concept of the head and its association with the serpent, we find the Greek god Pan, seen by many scholars as one of the progenitors of the horned god, found in so many places around the world. According to many sources, his father was Hermes, the welder of the Caduceus. Other sources have him as the oldest god of all, older even than Zeus. At Cirencester, England, this horned god is depicted with two snakes rearing up, replacing his legs in a similar fashion to images of Dagon. In Greek legend, there is Dionysius, who is equated to the other horned gods as the god of animals and hunting, the same Dionysius who I found elsewhere to hold the chalice or elixir. There is also a female version of the horned god in Amalthea, the goat nymph goddess. She was the glorious nurse of Zeus and Pan. Zeus took one of Amalthea's horns and gave it to the nymphs. It became the horn of plenty, a precursor to the Holy Grail. Upon Zeus becoming the Lord of the universe, he set Amalthea's image among the stars as a Capricorn, which has a fish or serpent's tail. On frescoes in the Roman catacombs, the ancient pagans drew images of the sea-goat carrying the caduceus, therefore linking the horned god with the healing and wise elements of the serpent. This image alone, as the goat of Mendes, was to move in alchemical and Kabbalist circles much later on. The wandering Jew and the horned god Osiris and Dionysus all are synonymous with the now infamous Greek man. The Greek man, or indeed woman, can be seen across the world in medieval and even modern cathedrals and churches. In fact, there are thousands of green men and women across Europe. These depictions are ancient and have the distinct pagan origins. And now that we understand our diverse pagan heritage included the worship of the serpent and the many things that this entails, we must also understand that Christianity adopted it. The green man is the fertile god of nature, the god of life, and is therefore only fitting that he is a consort and a female version of equal status. The fact that there is less female green deities poking out of stone trees from the church wall is simply because Christianity took on the paternal aspects of the Jewish religion. In truth, a rich, fertile, and active nature simply had to have a dual nature of male and female and mirror the life of those on our plane for existence. But what are the origins and meanings behind this peculiar little character? Could it be from the idea of the time of Moses that the area of snakebite turned green? The green man or woman was therefore not necessarily green due to the foliage, but may have been due to the idea that he, she was immortal due to the healing venom of the snake. El-Kidri is the Arabic term meaning green, and is said by some to be linked to the infamous Sumerian Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, in one epic tale, tried to find the herb that brings eternal life, the elixir, but a snake steals it while he is taking a bath. Gilgamesh is also the one who cut the chalupu tree, which is surrounded by serpents at its base. He takes the tree to Inanna, but keeps the rootstock where the snakes had been and makes the magic wands, Miku and Puku, said to be progenitors of the serpent rods of Moses and Aaron. El-Kidr is also equated with St. George, the wandering Jew, Elijah, Moses, the one with the serpent staff, Melchizedek, the longest-lived person in the Bible, Dionysius, and the Druze say that El-Kidr is John the Baptist, which is interesting when we consider that Lady Raglan and Sir James Fraser pointed out that human representations of the Yer King and Queen, or green man and woman, were usually decapitated and then hung on a tree, as John is decapitated and Jesus is hung on the tree. This, of course, makes John and Jesus two aspects of the same thing. El-Kidr is said to be immortal, as he drank or fell into the well of the water of life. He is wise as a serpent, and several Sufi orders claim descent and initiation via him. With connections to Islam, we have to ask, did the Templars have any idea about El-Kidr? Was he the head they were accused of worshipping, known as Baphomet? El-Kidr is also linked by some to Al-Qaid, the Muslim star in the tale of Ursa Minor, behind the head of Draco. The color green is something seen often in folklore, myth, and legend, and strangely, it always seems to have some relationship with our tale here. Guinevere, the serpent-connected Queen of Arthur, is said to have green or emerald robes. Sir Gawain is the Green Knight. Wolfram von Eisenbach's Parzival, linked strongly to the Templar tale, has the hermit Trevisan with green reliquary. Even the sword used to behead John the Baptist is said to be emerald. Ancient Druids, neophytes, and the fairies were said to wear green, and as we know, green is a distinctively fertile and vegetative color across the world. For all these reasons, the secretive and ancient languages and symbols of alchemists, mystics, and even Gnostics is said to be the green language. Now, just a quick mention of Rosalind. Although the Sinclair who built Rosalind was not a Templar, he was linked to the Templars indirectly, and Rosalind has hundreds of green men images, as well as Templar symbols. The Angus Day, the five-pointed star or pinnacle, the head of Christ image or Baphomet, as well as the floriated cross and the dove in flight with the olive branch. Split up, and most of these images are purely Christian symbols or motifs stolen from one or more ancient religions. However, put together in one place with historical links to the Templars, we are left with little doubt that there must be a Templar and esoteric link. But inside Rosalind, one is always overcome with the sheer scale of the vegetation. It is simply like bringing the outside in. In fact, this is almost exactly what is happening. The Garden of Eden with the Tree of Life and the Tree of Knowledge were brought to this place. It was a place of knowledge and eternal life, and there is little wonder the green man should be in residence. Also, a few miles away from Rosalind is Temple, the modern-day name for Ballantradoc, the ancient headquarters of the Templars in Scotland. The fact remains that the Templars in Scotland did not die out. They just changed and went underground, hiding their signs so that nobody could prove their existence. However, that Rosalind Templar diversion out of the way, we have to try and make sense of what we have learned, and I apologize for bombarding you with lots of seemingly unrelated information. We begin this tale with stories of the Merovingians. This now infamous royal family has even found its way into the film The Matrix because of the perception that it has spawned secrets and secret societies around the world as if protecting something. This whole mythos has in fact become one of the best money spinners in the literary and film worlds. We are fed little bits of information, most of which is an outright scandalous set of lies created to bolster theories that simply do not hold water, and all the time we are forced away from the simple historic truths which underpin the balderdash spoken. The same way that the Templars' true purpose was hidden beneath words such as poverty. There is no relationship between the supposed lineage of Jesus and Mary to shapeshift reptiles. There is no lineage except that created in the mind of man. In fact, it would be a far stretch of the historian's imagination to accept that a real Jesus Christ existed at all in the form that is constantly rammed down our throats. Jesus, as we can clearly see, has the culmination of a great many pagan deities, and all of them, without exception, are linked in one way or another to the worship of the wise serpent and to the power of the sun. It is therefore no stretch of the imagination to understand that the character of Jesus was in part based upon these serpent deities. Just look at the shedding of skin, whereby the snake crawls into a dark place and leaves behind its skin and then emerges born again. The same thing happened to Christ as he died on the tree, was placed in a tomb, and once risen to new life, left behind his old skin or shroud. In Africa and elsewhere, the snake is still pinned to the tree as a votive, offering, or sacrifice for the health of the tribe. In some places it is even pierced on the side. Christ was equated to the brazen serpent of Moses, and we were told to be wise as serpents. In truth, the ancient and pagan worship of the wise serpent has slithered unseen into our so-called modern religions. What there is, in fact, as we can see from the disparate evidence presented above, is a whole host of clues laid bare before our very eyes. All we have to do is eradicate the preconceived thoughts that are in our minds. These thoughts were placed there at Sunday school, in textbooks, from the silver screen, or indeed from now imposing internet. Try to break a boundary here with me for a moment. Imagine, if you will, a world that holds no mystery. No, this isn't the beginning of a John Lennon song. It is a serious attempt to alter our perspective. Imagine that there are no ghosts, no aliens, no Loch Ness monsters, or Bigfoot. Just imagine that man has simply evolved over vast periods of time and to a point where he suddenly or slowly became conscious of the world around him and his own place in it. It's like looking at a monkey and watching it as it looks around, picks up a few things, and then something comes into its mind and it is startled. We can see in its eyes and actions that it is scared to death. It has suddenly realized that it is sentient and quite separate from the world around him. He looks at the other monkeys now with an austere gaze and pities them. But he is also very different now, and so takes himself away from nature and begins to use the world around him for the products it can supply. Gradually, like a baby, his mind tries to work out how everything is put together and how to take them apart. He wants to know what those points of light are in the sky, what that big yellow round thing is, and the white one that changes shape at night. He'd never spotted that before, and so he analyzes everything. A few hundred years pass by, and the descendants of our little monkey are losing their hair because they have covered their bodies in the skin of other animals for the cold and wet times. They are using their minds, working out how to kill bigger and bigger quantities of animals for meat, which they have found gives them more satisfaction than eating vegetable and fruit matter all day long. Now they have more time on their hands, a concept they had no idea of before they became conscious. Time passes slowly and the mind develops. Some in the growing groups want to know more as they question. They become fearful of the dark, the deep waters, and the burning summers. Noises come from the woods that they no longer know because they have been too long away from that level of nature, and they wish to understand. The new world of the stars, sun, moon, raging waters, reflections, and death, all must be explained or avoided. For thousands of years, these new men experiment with the natural world and discover all kinds of cures and even mind-altering drugs. Then one crippled little monkey man takes some strange-looking mushroom, and in his own mind he disappears into another world, a world that the new consciousness becomes aware of as the unconscious world of imagination. But these concepts are not yet born, and so this other world is real, very real. And when the monkey man returns, he tells the others of his vision trip. He is also adamant in his belief that others try the process too and experience archetypal visions, and so also believe the process to be real. They see spirals and strange serpentine shapes that modern research has proven to be at the deepest level of our psyche, and so when awake they spot these shapes all around them and see the snake disappear into the other world and emerge with a new life. It is a special animal, more special than all the others. Years pass, and we now see large wooden buildings, circles of trees and pathways, all mirroring these other worlds. Pictures are painted on these structures and inside caves of the wonderful otherworldly visions. Men and women have been chosen to access these worlds for the rest of the growing tribe, and they become healers and guides, medicine men and priests. All around, they paint and carve images of snakes, and folklore erupts with tales of their ways. These new priests take a name, serpent priests and shining ones, and very soon they are even forming their own child's head into the elongated shape of a snake. It is not fanciful imagination. This is not aliens or beings from other dimensions. This is hard archaeological and historical fact. The evidence is there. We zoom forward to the 21st century, and what do we find? Modern myths of saviors and Christmen who can access other worlds. Tales of green men and immortal she-man like semi-deities, and now stone buildings and beautiful depictions of myths that stretch back in time to our ancient monkey man who sat one day and almost fell off his perch when he realized what the hell he was. We also see another myth forming. These Merovingians are said to be a dynasty of Frankish priest kings with magical powers. Now cast your mind back to a dark age of humanity and the emerging medieval period. The folk of Europe blindly follow a myth created in the Holy Land by some wise monkeys called Gnostics. A take of a man who was the Son of God. It is all taken so literally, so simply, but life is hard. Death and pain are everywhere, and the idea of a crusade comes forth to go and save souls in the Holy Land. In battle and death, suffering men can find atonement for their sins and a glorious life in heaven. And so in their thousands they depart and battle the might of Islam. They take the holy city of Jerusalem, but along the way, men with minds meet and communicate with holy men from other faiths. Such conversations were impossible in Europe. new influences are now at play. New concepts that there is more to the spiritual life than just the simple literal Christianity. In fact, these men of thought soon discover that their own religion is in fact based upon much older myths of serpent worship and immortality through the power of the sun and snake. A concept so wholly encompassed in the idea of the Holy Grail, the cup that holds the blood of the one true great serpent god himself. The cup that is in the mind of the illuminated. Imagine then also the fact that these newfound truths were pure heresy in a world dominated by the power of a vicious Catholic Church who jealously guards its literalisms of the Gnostic texts. Nobody who dare to openly speak of such truths in a world of utter and complete control by the ruling elite. And so the truths are hidden, coded, and kept secret. New groups are formed that protect these secrets and pass them on through time. This stream of information from one generation to another becomes symbolized in the bloodline, the truth of the Holy Grail passed down from one age to another through the long line of initiates via the sacred bloodline of secrets. This is the truth, that all of the secrets were in fact hidden in plain sight, and the key to understanding them was protected throughout the dark period of Catholic control. The Templars did discover the Grail, or truth, and they did pass on its knowledge. In this way, what they did was heresy, and that had to be stamped out. So many stories came so close, and yet were so far away.